Welcome back to First Round Frenzy. Matt and Cole here, going into our final division in our pre-draft overviews, the NFC West. They're a division that were very, very close to the NFC Championship game last year. About what was it, 10 yards away from making it in. But they're getting ready. There's been a lot of changes within the division in terms of some star power. Obviously, DK Metcalf leaving the Seahawks, Devontae Adams joining the Rams, and Sam Darnold, probably the biggest name, or probably the biggest move, is
Yeah.
joining the Seahawks, replacing Geno Smith. So, Kole should be an exciting one, and they're a division that are, they're even though there's a lot of change, it's still probably going to be very competitive at the top.
Yeah, and I think last year was like one of the worst NFC West overall division, like as the division as a whole that we've seen in a while. Because usually, like the Seahawks have been dominant for our whole life, back in the early Russell Wilson beast mode, Legion of Boom days. And then the Niners started getting, catching fire, going crazy. Then you had the Rams winning a Super Bowl, and the Cardinals, back in the day when they had Carson Palmer, were always, and Larry Fitz, they were always a playoff team and a chance to always get to the NFC Championship game. So now, like, it's kind of a new era for, the bulk of what's going on in this division. I mean, Matthew Stafford's still coming back again with the Rams. They're not quite in the new era in LA. We'll get more into that later. But, overall, there's a lot of changes, like you said, going on. And, Arizona is still an interesting team because ideally you would want Kyler Murray to find success and, try to get that team into the playoffs and do some, find some success there in this division. But I think overall this division bounces back in a big way next year, and the Niners get back on track. I think the Seahawks have a good year with Sam Darnold and surprise a lot of people, and then the Rams I think will be as good as ever next year as well.
Yeah, I think, despite all the changes, there's still a lot of top tier talent in this division. And, even for teams like Cardinals who've struggled in the past few years, if Kyler Murray finally has his breakout year, they're going to be looking to potentially win the division. I mean, it's not the strongest division in football, but it's weak enough that a team from the bottom can move to the top pretty quickly if everything goes their way. So let's start
Yeah.
with the Seahawks. Obviously, they've had the biggest changes this year with DK Metcalf leaving, Sam Darnold coming in to replace Geno. Cole, will let you take this. They've had a really interesting offseason and a lot of picks. So it should keep getting better for them.
Yeah, I never understand what the Seahawks are doing. They just like they like living in the realm of mediocrity because that's where they were with Geno Smith, and I was like pounding on the table for years. I was like, they got to get, Anthony Richardson. They got to get Hendon Hooker. They got to get some of these guys to have someone behind Geno Smith to take over, and then they just trade Geno Smith, turn their attention to Sam Darnold, who pretty much gives you the exact same quarterback, like a fringe, like top 15 quarterback, and that's the
Hey, but
highest
he's
he's going to
younger.
be.
He's younger.
He is younger, and they liked what Sam Darnold showed with the Minnesota Vikings being the full-time starter there last year. And yes, he was with Kevin O'Connell. And what does he look like not without Kevin O'Connell? Does he go back to being the Sam Darnold we knew he was before the 2024 season? That's kind of going to be a big question for the Seahawks team. But like I said, I think that they're going to surprise a lot of people either way. Even after losing, all that they lost, DK Metcalf, they lost some big pieces on defense. Their offensive line still needs a couple more holes to fill. But I think that they got plenty of draft picks. They got 10 draft picks. They have, like, we're going to get into it, what, 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. So they can fill some of these holes in a big way upcoming. And we'll see. But, some of the additions they made have been a little wonky. Jackson Smith the Jig was a primary slot specialist when they had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside, and then you get rid of DK, you trade him away. Tyler Lockett's still out there in free agency, and the only move you make really at wide receiver is adding in another slot guy in Cooper Kupp, and then a downfield burner who's also inconsistent with his hands and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So I still think a wide receiver one is needed on this offense. So we'll see what moves this team makes to try to accomplish some of those goals they have still remaining on this roster.
Yeah, and it's seeming more and more likely as we move into the draft that, from reports, it seems like a lot of wide receivers are moving down draft
Hmm.
boards, that teams are focusing on other positions here. So with 18, the Seahawks should potentially have their pick of wide receivers. There's a chance that the Cardinals go wide receiver potentially, or the 49ers and Cowboys at 11 and 12. But other than that, it doesn't really seem like there are any wide receiver needy teams. So if they decide to go down that route, that'll be interesting. And then obviously the big um, positional group of this draft, the defensive line, both interior and edge rushers, they, despite, you know, it's there's probably going to be three, maybe four off the board by the time they get there. So they should still have a pretty good number of people to choose from if they decide to go down that route as well.
Yeah, they're in a good spot in the draft. And I think the other big thing too to keep an eye on is even if they don't go with a wide receiver, potentially look at the offensive lineman too. Because like I said, they've got some holes to fix on the offensive line. They're still in a good spot to get a solid offensive lineman at 18, or even maybe a little bit later in the draft as well. Maybe you could look at, 2 second round picks. I got 2 third round picks as well. But it's hard to say because like the passing, they were top 5 in passing yards last year, but that's because of Geno, DK, Tyler Lockett, Smith and Jigba, like I talked about, getting the ball down the field to those guys. But rushing with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet finished 28th in the league. And I don't think it's because of those two players. I think it's because of the protection up front. So I'm looking at maybe some, rushing style interior offensive lineman. Tyler Booker maybe gets back into the first round. I would love that as a fit there. It's strong, run style offensive lineman at big position I need at right guard. So we'll see what direction they go in. But, John Schneider's got some different options, and it's interesting to see what he does. Maybe he finally goes quarterback and gets the guy
Yeah.
behind Sam Darnold because there's an out in Sam Darnold's contract too, to kind of protect himself if he doesn't work out.
Yeah, and that's definitely something to keep in mind as we start to see a lot more quarterbacks get first round talk. And that range that we're talking about here, the 21 to the Steelers, 18 to the Seahawks here, though that's kind of where teams are probably going to be looking to kind of get in and potentially get their guy. Are they a trade out candidate and get more picks? You never know. But Kole, let's move in to this mock draft. As you mentioned, they got 5 picks here. Pick 18, 50, and 52 in round 2, and then 82 and 92 in round 3. So Kole, why don't we get started here? Who is your first round pick for the Seattle Seahawks?
So I'm gonna go with the wide receiver. Get a wide receiver one, and I got Ted McMillan being the wide receiver one off the board for what I have. It might change because I know the Cowboys really like Matthew Golden, and all like the top mocks this past week have had Matthew Golden being the wide receiver one of the class coming up the board wise. But I think Ted McMillan's starting to fall for some odd reason because he's the most true like X potential player. And that's what the Seahawks are now missing after losing DK Metcalf. So I think you add him into that offense at the X position, and then you kind of just mix and match on the other outside in the slot, JSN and Cooper Kupp kind of gives Sam Darnold a trio of offensive playmakers to work with. So I like him in the first round. I'm not going to go O-line. So I got him in the first round. And even in round 2, the first pick at 50. So they got 50 and 52, which is interesting, kind of like near back-to-back picks. So 50, I got JT Tuimoloau, defensive end out of Ohio State, just because I think he really is going to help that run defense a lot and also set the edge. He's not the most athletic, like
Yeah.
exciting guy athleticism wise, but he was productive and a very traditional edge rusher, which is going to fit what Mike McDonald likes for that defensive end position. They did bring in DeMarcus Lawrence too, so an aging veteran kind of add in a guy behind him to help out with that defense because they also have Leonard Williams too at the edge rusher spot. And then in the other pick of the second round, now I go with the offensive lineman on the inside and Marcus Mimbo. And I like this guy out of Purdue. I think he's going to be a really good value in the second round as a guy that can play multiple positions on the interior, maybe even kick out to right tackle if you need him to. But that right guard spot definitely needs to be addressed. I think at 52 might be a little too late for a Tyler Booker. So an upgrade over Anthony Bradford here in Marcus Mimbo. Third round with the 2 picks, 82 and 92. I have Ty Robinson. We've mentioned him before with another team, but I like him being a fit, an athletic defensive tackle. He looked like a beast at the combine. And at that defensive tackle spot, they did lose Roy Robertson Harris. And, Draymond Jones was kind of a tweener edge interior guy. So more help on the interior on the defense is never a bad thing. I mean, they drafted Byron Murphy last year. They still have Jerron Reed there. So just add a depth guy behind those two to rotate. And then with the last pick, they need cornerback help. And I didn't like waiting this long to get one, but I like Quincy Riley's fit for that defense as well out of Louisville, a guy we haven't mentioned yet. But I mean, he could fit what they have. They got Rick Woolen back there. They got Devon Witherspoon, two guys they recently drafted. Rick Woolen, Devon Witherspoon. They also have Josh Joby. So that's the position you kind of look to upgrade over Joby. Maybe a guy like Quincy Riley can come in and fit that bill.
Yeah, and that's a really young cornerback room as well. As you mentioned, Josh Joby also drafted just a few years ago, I think 2 years ago,
Hmm.
if I remember correctly. I really like the JT Tuimoloau pick. I think we talked about it a few episodes ago with Jack Sawyer potentially going to the Lions, I believe I had in my mock draft. And those two guys, in my opinion, are two of the safer edge edge positions in edge players, sorry, in this class, as they just seem like they have a very, very high floor. They're
Yeah.
very sound technically. They set a good edge. They got production each year. Both of them improve their production every single year at Ohio State, despite them both playing on the same team and having elite teammates in there as well. They improved every single year, and they could make an impact immediately. And then Ted McMillan, obviously the big move here, going out and getting your DK Metcalf replacement. And he's a guy that we were having projections of him going in the top 10 at the beginning of
Yeah.
this process. And having him drop to 18 and you trading away DK Metcalf, getting draft capital back, and then going out and getting someone who's obviously not the physical specimen that DK Metcalf is, but is a guy that could potentially replicate his production or better his production over the past few years. I say that is a really good trade off there for the Seahawks, and getting Cooper Kupp as well involved. Those three guys on as wide receivers for Sam Darnold should be plenty to maintain the good passing attack that they had this past season.
Yeah, and that takes pressure off MVS having to
Yep.
be a main factor outside of being a deep threat too. So that keeps him in the role that fits him well. I'm not buying into this John Schneider's, talk of him saying I'd be careful when you hear people say this isn't a great quarterback class. That's definitely smoke. I don't think the Seahawks are drafting a quarterback in this class. If you
What,
didn't draft
Jackson
one of the
Dart's
last
not
three
going
or
18 to
no.
the Seahawks?
If he didn't draft one of those guys the last couple of years, like a Penix, or try to move up for a Penix, or get an Anthony Richardson the last couple of years, he's not going to get a guy now in this class, I don't think.
All right, so let's move on to the team that probably had their worst season possible last year, and that is the San Francisco 49ers. They're a team that's made a lot of moves. Obviously, losing Deebo Samuel this year is probably the biggest, but they also lost some key defensive players as well. Leonard Floyd, Travarius Ward, Dre Greenlaw. They lost the safety. Talanoa Funga as
Yeah.
well in free agency. So they're a team that is in desperate need of retooling here. And in a division that's getting younger and younger, they're lucky they have 4 picks this year in days 1, 2, and 3. So they have the ability to replace some of these guys. It's just how do they go out there and retool this team? You've got Brock Purdy, who's probably going to be getting his deal soon. We're hearing around $45 million a year, which is fairly large. Everybody knows here that I'm a huge fan of Brock coming out of college. $45 million a year. I'm not sure if he's necessarily earned that yet, but that's what the market is right now. So we'll see what happens, because that also puts a huge kink in this team's ability to rebuild after losing some key pieces and also older pieces. We're looking at Christian McCaffrey, injury prone, getting older. Trent Williams, we talked about last episode, as someone that's getting older and is going to potentially need a replacement soon. We'll see if we do that in this mock draft here and if they do it this year in real life. But they lost a lot of pieces, and they're going to need a big time draft these next few years to kind of get themselves back to where they were in the past.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely preparing for the upcoming Brock Purdy extension, and they kind of did it a good way. I mean, on paper, this is still a really good team, and with Kyle Shanahan leading this team, they could probably do a really good job of competing in the NFC if everyone stays healthy. Because I mean, McCaffrey was injured so much last year. Brandon Ayuk missed the entire season, so then you're relying on Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings being your number one. But now you have those 3 guys as the threes, and then you add in Isaiah Hodgins, Russell Gage is in the room, Demarcus Robinson's in the room. They still have a lot of weapons, even after getting rid of the guys they got rid of. I mean, so George Kittle's still there. So we'll see what happens. Kyle Shanahan finally got his guy in Mac Jones.
Yep.
Let's not forget that
Yep.
to
Yep.
back
Of
up
course.
Brock Purdy. That was always a funny thing going back to that draft where I from day one had Trey Lance going number 3 over, or number 2 or whatever it was, over
Number
Mac
3, yeah.
Jones. And oh yeah, it was number
And it
3. So
happened.
it happened. Trey Lance, no matter what, lived in infamy, even though it did not go well from that point on. But either way, I'm excited about the defense too. And the defense
Okay.
pretty much kept all the same pieces. Yeah, they lost Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw, which is two big losses, but D Winters will step up in a big way. Jair Brown, I really
Yep.
liked him in the draft, and then Richie Grant and added in. But Bob Saleh's going to do a good job. I mean, give it to
Yes.
Shanahan for always having a great defensive coordinator, and that guy should still be a head coach right now if it wasn't for the Jets. Sorry, Matt. But he's going to be a great defensive coordinator and hopefully just be in charge of that team, be in charge of that unit and do what he does best, leading a defense.
I think what's great for this team is one, they have a great coaching staff, as you mentioned, with Bob Salah and obviously Kyle Shanahan in charge here. And I think it's really great that there's going to be a lot of young players here that get some significant playing time that could
Hmm.
potentially be taking over this team, right? We've already talked about Brock Purdy as, quarterback coming in. He's getting his new contract. He's going to be leading this team into the future. But we're talking about Isaac Arendo, who you and I talked about a lot last year as a guy that's potentially going to be taking a huge workload from Christian McCaffrey. As you lost Elijah Mitchell and you lost uh what's his name, Jordan Mason, or
Yeah.
yeah, Jordan Mason. And obviously they're probably going to go and get a running back on day 3, maybe on day 3. You never know. I think they have some pieces that have to fill first, but go out and get another running back to take some workload. We're looking at Ricky Pearsall, who you already mentioned, who had a decent rookie year after coming off of his injury. Jacob Cowing is probably going to get some playing time as well. Uh, you know, Jair Brown, who you mentioned, really quality guy coming out of Penn State. He's probably going to get. He's probably going to be the starter going into this year.
Yeah.
Maybe Jason Pinnock or Richie Grant get in there, but I'm assuming Jair will be one of the two starters there. So it's a big year for the young guys on the squad to try to make a name for themselves and be long-standing players in this league.
Yeah, that's what makes this team scary because we already know how good Shanahan can be as a head coach and Robert Saleh as the defensive coordinator. And if these defensive guys and or younger guys in general can step up and play quality roles on like rookie contracts, like that makes the Niners scary for another 4 to 5 more years while they're not having to pay anybody because they already get their big contracts done and out of the way ahead of time.
Exactly. So let's move into this 3 round mock draft. As I mentioned, they have 4 picks in the first 3 days: pick 11 in round 1, pick 43 in round 2, and picks 75 and 100 in round 3. So they've got a good selection here of picks. And with pick 11, I am going to go with Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan. I think this makes all the sense in the world for this team because the biggest question mark on Will Johnson is what is his speed like and can he play in man? And guess what? The 49ers mostly play in zone, so this is the perfect fit for him. He's going to come in, he's going to replace Travarius Ward as cornerback 1 immediately, and it's a huge need for this team because we have just talking with the Seahawks. They're probably going to have Ted McMillan, most likely as their wide receiver 1. You got the Rams, who have Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua. You've got the Cardinals that if Marvin Harrison Jr. turns it around and becomes that top 5 pick, he's going to be a huge problem as well. So
Yeah.
when you're looking at this division, you need a number 1 corner. And, we talked about the defense. I would say that the secondary is the weakness of that defense, right? We're looking at Trey Brown and Renardo Green as most likely the starting outside corners at this point, with Diomodor Lenoir as the slot is what I would assume it's going to go right now. They also brought in Neil Saran as well, Saran Neal,
Yeah.
who could be an interesting player as well there. But I think they need someone that is going to be a lockdown guy, and that's Will Johnson. I think it makes sense. They need an outside guy. He's an outside guy. And first of all, I don't think the speed is that big of an issue to begin with. I think when you watch the tape, his play speed speaks for itself, and he's perfectly fine. But you got to take into account the timed speed. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. Then we go into round 2, pick 43, and I'm going to go defense again. And I know how we talk about defense as the strength of this team, but there are guys here that can help this team immediately. And I go Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, the interior defensive lineman. When you look at this, Jordan Elliott and Evan Anderson are not the biggest name guys that you can have in this team. They're replaceable, and you need some depth as well. You only have 4 players at that position currently on the roster. And Tyleik Williams, a plug-and-place guy that can come in and be an immediate run stopper for this team. I think you have plenty of pass rush potential within this group, but you need someone that can stick in the middle of this defense and just stop the run. And that's another strong suit of this division, right? I mean, when we're looking at it, this division has a lot of talent on offense, They just
Yeah.
haven't been able to put it all together. Talking about James Conner and Trey Benson over in Arizona. And, you were just talking about the Seahawks running back duo, and the Rams have two or three really good running backs as well. So to get a guy like Tyleik Williams, who's arguably the best run stopper in this class at the interior position in round two, I think that makes sense. Then we go to the round three positions, and we finally go offense. Kyle Williams out of Washington State at pick 75, and Holland Pierce, offensive tackle out of Rutgers at pick 100. The wide receiver, I think you can go with anybody. I think you need a wide receiver. We talked about Jacob Cowing and Ricky Pearsall, but I think you need that wide receiver two potential in this team, and I don't think you have that. Brandon Ayuk, obviously coming off of an injury as well. You're not sure about his future either. We were talking about trade talks as well. So I think you really need to add some depth into this position. I think Kyle Williams is getting some talks about potentially being a second round guy. So I'm not sure if he's going to be available here, but I really like his ability to do stuff behind the line of scrimmage, whether it's screen passes or taking end arounds or whatever it may be. So he kind of replaces that Deebo Samuel aspect. Another guy that you could go with is Savion Williams, who might be a closer one-to-one switch to Deebo, just because he can play as a wildcat quarterback, take balls from the running back position as well. I think we all know the ideal one would be Luther Burden, but I ended up going wide cornerback with pick 11, so didn't do that. And then Holland Pierce is the future replacement for
Mhm. Trent Brown or Trent Williams,
Williams at left tackle. He's a guy that obviously has immense size at the left tackle position, has played a really good season at Rutgers this past year. And the great thing is, Trent Williams is still there. So he doesn't need to be, the guy immediately. He can sit, learn, get his technique down a little bit better. And I think he could potentially be a future centerpiece on that offensive line as well for the 49ers.
Yeah, so I'll start with Will Johnson. That's what I have like written down right now as well for the 49ers. I think that's a great fit for what they need on defense. He's a good fit for, what kind of how the Jets were with their cornerback room under Robert Saleh. Kind of he fits that same style and play style. He's not quite at a Sauce Gardner level by any means, but he'd be a similar number one for Robert Saleh's defense. Tyleik Williams as well, like the running game overall, you talk about in this division, but in the conference too, like when you get to the playoffs with this team and Kyle Shanahan tries to get that unit back to the postseason in the NFC, you got Josh Jacobs, you got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, you got Saquon Barkley,
Yep.
Maybe with, Ashton Jeanty goes to the Cowboys, they got a big guy and they get back to the playoffs again. So there's some really good running backs overall in the NFC. So adding more talent on the interior of the defensive line definitely is going to help that unit compared to what they have right now. Kyle Williams, I think is a good fit. Like you said, I wonder if he's going to go higher.
I think
It's
he
a day
probably
two,
will go
and it's a weird range because some teams still have him as a third round guy, but then you keep getting talks so he's going to go like early second round to like
higher.
Tennessee at pick 34. And I don't know, it's weird, and we'll see what happens with Kyle Williams, but a lot of teams seem to be really high on that guy. Maybe another option could be an AO Minor,
Yeah.
or AO Manor because of the run blocking ability that could help out with that offense, and Kyle Shanahan would like that a lot. I think I
I
talked
was
about
thinking
him.
about him, but I had him to the Chiefs last episode. So I was like,
Yeah,
let's stay
we talked
away
about
from
like the modern coordinators would love him, or
Oh, yeah.
coordinators and like coaches would love him, like the Matt LaFleur's, the Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay's and Andy Reid, like guys that can block at the receiver position. Like even Ben Johnson's talked highly about that ability. So maybe he could be an option for the Niners as well, but some kind of wide receiver to that room. And Holland Pierce, that's a good range for him. I had him at 98 when I did the Dolphins mock draft
Yep.
for the same kind of thing. Like the Dolphins just got rid of Teron Armstead, who retired, and they need a new future left tackle. And I thought that was good value in the third round for a guy like him. And the same thing goes here for the Niners as well. If they, Miami doesn't go with them, the 49ers definitely should as a guy that can sit behind Trent Williams.
All right. So let's move on to the Los Angeles Rams. So close to making it all the way. They were one play away from the NFC Championship game and taking down the eventual world champs there, the Philadelphia Eagles. And they're a team that, they're old and they're getting older with a lot of their moves.
But
Obviously,
also
bringing
like younger at the same time. They're a
yeah,
weird
but
team.
also young. Yeah, it's really weird. They're kind of going in two different directions in like two different ways. So obviously the biggest news: Cooper Kupp out, Devonta Adams in. Cole, I'll let you go and take us through how their offseason has gone so far.
Yeah, so the Rams in general, and since the Super Bowl win and where they kind of went all in for that Super Bowl, have slowly been reaching this crossroads, and they're not quite there yet, but we could tell this offseason that it's getting close. The decision to move on from Cooper Kupp sucked because he was such a beloved player in that franchise and in that organization, and it's just he's getting old. And but then you replace him with Devontae Adams, who's also on the wrong side of 30, but can still play at a very high level. I mean, he looked great playing with Rodgers and the Jets after he made that, mid-season trade last year, was still able to put together some big games. I think he went over like 200 yards in one
Yep.
game toward the end of the season when it didn't matter and everyone stopped watching Jets football but Matt.
Yep, yep, yep.
So the Rams, they're going to keep going. They're going to try to make a couple more pushes. I mean, Sean McVay is already, still one of the youngest coaches in the league, but they keep bringing up retirement rumors every time like they get close and don't make it, which is odd, but that's part of the crossroads too, is, when, Matthew Stafford's done, is Sean McVay going to walk away with him? It's the same thing we talked about when Aaron Donald was done. And, I think this team going to be over at that point. But they want to keep running it back and, moves like Puna Ford, Devontae Adams coming back, Matthew Stafford, obviously getting him extended for a couple more years and under contract helps along the way of being, still being a top team in the NFC in my eyes, because Sean McVay led offense can be one of the best offenses in football. Again, if everyone's healthy and with Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Devontae Adams, and Stafford throwing the ball, they're going to put up
Yep.
some ridiculous numbers this year. So my eyes is on that defense. What this defense does with Chris Shula's defense, they have some young guys and young pieces. They're trying to build that side of the ball for the draft. Jared Bursey and Brendan Fisk last year were incredible, slam
So
dunk.
good.
The defensive player of the year and a defensive player of the year runner up, pretty much, or rookie of the
Yep.
year runner up. Big moves on that defense. They had another guy last year, Byron Young too, and Kobe Turner as well. That defensive line is loaded with
They
talent.
do a great job of drafting that defensive front, I'll tell you.
Oh yeah, they have a really good scouting department too, and that's why James Gladstone went to become the Jaguars general manager from this Rams team. But I really like Les Snead, and overall, like would love to like switch. I don't want to switch allegiances and go to the Rams, but I love the Rams coaching staff. I love what the Rams do as an organization, everything about this team. So we'll see if it keeps it going. Les Snead has mentioned that the 20s is pick purgatory, and they're at pick 26 and he's always willing to make a deal. He said F them picks not too long ago. So
Yeah.
I wonder if they move off 26, either up or down in the draft and potentially be on the move. But for the sake of them mocking just a little bit, we'll have them stay at 26 and see what they do there. But this team's reaching a crossroads, slow or short and sweet.
Yep.
Or, down the road, they're going to have to make a big decision as a franchise which direction they're going to head.
And the one thing that I love about the Rams is, they're always willing to adapt and go in a different direction in order to stay winning, right? We
Yeah.
talk about this crossroads coming up. I mean, the Rams just completely flipped their fortune by, trading Jared Goff and getting draft picks back, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we talk about this and, for years we're like, the Rams haven't had a first round pick in like 10 years. Da, da, da. And somehow they're still able to go out and get guys that are going to make an impact and help them win. So we keep talking about this crossroads. We don't know when or if it's ever going to come because of how good this front office is and their backroom scouting staff. And, we talk about the trade of Cooper Kupp, right? I feel like one of the things that I kept saying every single week during the season is where's Cooper Kupp? Even though he's on the field, he wasn't getting involved in the offense. And it just,
Mhm.
not saying that he's a bad football player anymore because he could go to Seattle this year and have another 1,000-yard receiving season, right? But they realized that Puka Nacua was getting the receptions. Puka Nacua took over what Cooper Kupp's role pretty much was all those prior years. And they said, we don't need this kind of receiver anymore. I know he's such a love guy. Get him out and go get Devontae Adams, who's more of a true number one outside kind of guy. So, like it or not, as a Rams fan, we won't know if it's a good trade until the season starts. If Devontae Adams has a great season, it's a good trade. But I think it was a long time coming for Cooper Kupp to be out. He just wasn't getting involved. He wasn't getting the touches he needed. But we'll see what we do. So Cole, as you mentioned, 3 picks on day 1, 2, and just 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Pick 26 in round 1 and picks 90 and 101 in round 3. So
Yeah.
Cole, take it away. Who are the Rams drafting with their first round pick?
So again, they're in an interesting spot because, like I said, the 26 Les Need views that as like purgatory being in the first round. So Ideally, I think they would move up for a Colston Loveland, maybe a Tyler Warren if they want to move that high. But we were saying the same thing last year about Brock Bowers. It was heavily rumored like the week of the draft that the Rams might try to move up for Brock Bowers, and they end up staying put and getting Jared Verse. And it worked out well for him. But they still don't have that tight end. Tyler Higbee has battled injuries in the past. They want to try to find an upgrade there of someone that can be a more dominant threat. So they're not going to get that at 26. One of those two guys won't fall there. And I don't think that they're going to try to push for another guy later in the draft. So I guess I got to go with Jackson Dart.
Ooh.
I'm gonna go QB. And Sean McVay is full of crap, saying that he hasn't done a lot of work on quarterbacks. And hours later, they confirmed they had a visit with Jackson Dart. You got to be kidding me! Like that was so hilarious, seeing that within like hours of each other. Those reports coming in, they're looking at the quarterback room because yeah, they got Jimmy Garoppolo, yeah, they got Stetson Bennett, and yeah, they got Matthew Stafford as a starter, but Jimmy Garoppolo and Stetson Bennett's not the future of this team, and neither is Matthew Stafford after this new extension runs out. And I think Jackson Dart is the perfect guy to sit behind Stafford. And I talked about all the issues I have with Jackson Dart being in a, one read offense and the scheme, and it's hard. No quarterbacks ever come from a Lane Kiffin offense and excelled at the NFL level. So I think he needs time to sit and learn a true pro style offense and a modern offense with McVay and learn the ropes over the next 2 years of Stafford's run and make it like a Jordan Love situation. And with Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers, they draft Jordan Love in the 20s. Aaron Rodgers was kind of ticked off because he didn't know if he was coming back or not, extended him, and then they go on a run, get to the NFC Championship game again. So I think that's kind of a similar situation the Rams might go in here. And then you just have Jackson Dart in the waiting. Shedeur Sanders also an option. If he falls past the Steelers, because I think McVay would like him being a very accurate quarterback and a toolsy quarterback that you just kind of build with over the next 2 years on the bench. So either one of those two guys, if they don't go quarterback, I think they go offensive tackle to try to shore up that left tackle spot. But I'm going to go Jackson Dart at 26. And then in the third round, pick 90, kind of a wild card guy here because we haven't talked about him before, but Barrett Carter. I think I had him listed on my linebacker rankings, but they need a true like dominant linebacker that can, put some fear in the heart of opposing defenses in that middle spot. And also we talked about the tight ends in this division. George Kittle, you got the guy out of Arizona that just got paid as well,
Trey
Trey
McBride, yeah.
McBride. Yep. And then so a guy that can cover the tight end spot and just be a reliable tackler around the middle. What they have at linebacker right now isn't the most exciting. Omar Spites and then Troy Reeder in your interior linebacker spot. I think you upgrade that in a big way with a guy like Barrett Carter coming in. And then pick 101, I have Ainias Peebles, another defensive lineman, but I think it works because this guy is violent. He's disruptive. You add him to that rotation and you just keep building the strength of that defense. What I don't like, however, is not going with a defensive back because I think, their secondary was a big issue last year for that defense and kind of like it wasn't the end all be all because Saquon Barkley kind of was the end all be all of that team in
Yeah.
the playoffs. So, but during the year, they really felt some strain in that secondary. But even after day three, they have, a pick in the fourth round and they have four picks in the sixth round. And that's where the team likes to build is day three. And when you look back at Lesney's draft classes and the guys are able to find diamonds in the rough there. So I think you get some secondary help in kind of those picks and, really take advantage of the scouting department they have in LA to find some, really worthwhile guys there.
Well, if you're looking for a defensive back, I heard Jalen Ramsey's available again for Miami. So
Run it
you never
back.
run it back with him. You never know. But no, I think this makes sense. And Jackson Dart is obviously, I think that would be a great place for him to go, learning from Sean McVay, sitting behind Matthew Stafford, I think would be the perfect person for him to sit behind. But seeing this, I think trading back is probably their best option here and
Yeah, I agree.
accumulating some more picks. If they can trade back with a team that's really looking for someone in that range, right? Getting above, the 27, 28, 29, etc. You can potentially get a second round pick out of this, depending on who's trying to trade back in. And then, you're potentially looking at a very, very solid player here, and you can get that corner, right? Maybe it's Trey Amos or AZ Thomas or someone like that in the second round. Or maybe you end up going linebacker earlier on if Carson Schwessinger is available in the second round, and then you do corner or safety in with your round three pick. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. I think we all know they're going to get at least one stud on day three. And we'll see what happens. It'll probably be a defensive lineman if we've ever seen it, or potentially a wide receiver like we saw with Puka Nacua. But we'll see what happens, and I think no matter what, they'll be ready. And I agree with you. If it's not Jackson Dart and they stay there, it's got to be offensive line, probably Connerly or
Josh Simmons, maybe.
first Josh Simmons. If Josh Simmons is
Yeah.
there, I think he's the pick, but probably him or Connerly if they go that direction.
Yeah, and we'll see. I think I agree. Like, if they're not sold on Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders, and both are on the board, I mean, the Giants and the Browns are going to be calling in the late 20s into the 30s to try to move back and get that fifth-year option to get their quarterback. The Saints too. So there's options to move out of the late first round and in the late 20s, and they're definitely a team that can try to recoup some more picks and move back and still get a impact player early in the second round.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario for the Rams is that the Saints pass and the Giants and Browns pass, and then potentially the Steelers pass. That would
Yeah,
be
and you
their
just take the
best
best
option
offer.
because
Yeah.
Cam Ward is the only quarterback that's gone. Everybody else is available, and now you can just field offers from 5 or 6 potential teams. I'm even hearing Jets talk about a potential quarterback, and this is every year. And whatever. I forget who it was, but someone was talking about the Jets are interested at 7 at a quarterback, and I don't want to talk about it. But you never know. But I think the Rams are in a good situation either way because if even one quarterback is available, there's going to be a bidding war for that pick. All right, so let's move on to the Arizona Cardinals, who are a team that's very interesting to say the least. I think there's a lot of different things that they can do in round one because they have a lot of holes. But I think if they fix those holes, they can be contending for the division title because they have so much young talent. They're just waiting for it to, prosper and have their breakout, right? We've been waiting for Kyler Murray to become that number one overall pick worthy quarterback for years. Marvin Harrison Jr., is he going to finally break out, right? We got a few more years of James Conner, who is obviously a very, very good running back, and Trey Benson just behind him. You spent a first round pick on Paris Johnson to be your franchise left tackle. And that defense isn't great, but it's got enough pieces there that they can make something happen. So when we look at this team, I think one of the things that they definitely need to address is the front seven. They lost a lot of pieces this offseason. They lost Kairesis Tonga, interior defensive line. They lost Julian Arquara off the edge. They lost Roy Lopez of the interior. They lost Victor Dimukeje off the edge as well. They brought in guys like Calais Campbell, which is great, but he's kind of old. So he's not a long-term option there. You bring in Dalvin Tomlinson for the interior, which is good for the short term, but you still need some pieces in there to bring you to the next level. So that's one area that I think they definitely need to address. And then after that, it's just finding immediate impact players that can bring the best out of the rest. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how they attack this, whether they end up going offense in round one to give Kyler another option in case Marvin Harrison Jr. has another slow year. But as of right now, from what I'm seeing, they've got some holes to fill, but I think if done right, they can have a big step up this year.
Yeah, and I like that they brought in, like, speaking about the defense and the young guys they had that are trying to break out. I like that, they were kind of not really tired of waiting on them to break out, but they brought in the veterans to give them the
Yep.
extra motivation to break out, to like help them take that next step. Like you said, Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson, Josh Sweat. Those are guys that are going to help out BJ Ojulari, Baron Browning, Zaven Collins, Darius Robinson, who they took in the first round last year.
Yep.
Help those guys get to that next level and get that defense on the right track, and we'll see what happens. They got two, I mean, pretty much the whole coaching staff is like really young. So this whole team and the whole organization is young. We'll see what happens going forward. I still want some more weapons on the offense because that was kind of an issue last year. Marvin Harrison wasn't quite what we expected as a rookie. And then you got Michael Wilson and Zay Jones and Greg Dortch behind those guys. It's still the same crew they have and the same running back room pretty much. So there's, trying to make this offense work with the pieces that they have in place and hope that Kyler Murray can elevate that room. So we'll see. I think Trey McBride's still like the biggest factor to game plan against on that defense and or on the offense for opposing defenses, and they rightfully paid him a lot of money for what he brings to that entire team.
100%. And, that's one of the things when I was looking, they've got pick 16 in the first round. And I kind of have three options there. And I think it's probably the same three options that they're looking at, if I'm being completely honest. And it's Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. It is Jahdae Barron out of Texas. And it is Matthew Golden out of Texas. In my opinion, I think those are the three guys that best fit their team. Jihad Campbell is obviously a great hybrid player. He can kind of be what Isaiah Simmons was supposed to be for them all those years ago when they picked him at number 7. And, you get a guy that can play as that interior linebacker off ball, or if you really need him off the edge, he can be that guy and go and rush the passer. So I think that's a really interesting option. If Matthew Golden is available at 16, if the Cowboys pass, he is a guy that I think would be a great complement to Marvin Harrison Jr., right? He's a guy that can play outside. He can play in the slot. He's more of a quick, shifty, kind of route running wide receiver compared to Marvin Harrison Jr.'s just physical dominance and downfield threat, right? So it'll be interesting to see. I think that's maybe Emeka Egbuka is an option as well, but I think he's more of a second round target at this point based on what I'm hearing. And then my final one, Jahdae Barron, as I mentioned, the defense. Sean Murphy-Bunting as their outside corner with Max Melton. Their nickelback is Garrett Williams. If I'm being honest, I haven't heard of him before. He could be someone good, but
He was from the Browns, I believe.
From the Browns?
Garrett Williams. Yeah, he started with the Browns.
All right, because I don't think I've heard of out of Syracuse.
No, never mind. I think they just got him in the draft.
Yeah, I think you're thinking Greedy Williams.
Greedy Williams, yeah.
Yeah. So
I got Garrett Williams 2 years ago in the draft.
Yeah. So I've never heard of him before, if I'm being honest. And I think that's an issue, especially when we're looking at the slot receivers in this division. Cooper Kupp, Jackson Smith and Jigba potentially. List goes on. Puka Nacua in the slot as well. So I think Jahdae Barron's a guy that could be a really interesting pick here. I think he was the guy that I had in my first ever mock draft. I had Jahdae Barron to the Cardinals. And I think over the past few years, I've had cornerbacks in my mock drafts to the Cardinals. But he's a guy that can play outside. He can play as that nickel. He can play as a dime linebacker as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they go here. But, I mean, they can really do anything they want because something will improve this team.
Yeah, and you look at the visits they brought in. Most teams are like kind of diversifying their visits of first round guys, day 2 guys, day 3/UDFA guys. Like most teams like ideally get a good pull for their top 30 visits. And the Cardinals have brought in a lot of people, but they brought in Will Johnson, Shamar Stewart, Ty Robinson, Walter Nolan, Trey Amos, Jalen Walker, James Pierce, Michael Williams, Princely Umanvielen, Nick Scourton, Olufemi Oladeo, Kelvin Banks, all guys who are going to be like in the top 40, top 50 selections. So even they're confused of what they want to do, and not really confused, but just uncertain of what position they're looking to target early. So I have defensive end, I think, as the need they potentially go with because, Michael Williams, James Pierce, Jalen Walker, Princely Umanvielen, Nick Scourton, Oladejo, Shamar Stewart, like that's a big edge. Like they're looking at all the like top edge rushers, so maybe that could be a way they go. But they're still looking at some offensive linemen. They're looking at, Will Johnson at corner. Maybe they look into bringing in Jahdae Barron, like you talked about. Maybe that gets announced because there's still some that are out there that happened today that are yet to be announced, yesterday by the time this comes out. So they're getting a big pool of some of the top guys in the draft, but most of them seem to be on the defense outside of like Kelvin Banks. So that was an interesting, one that came in earlier this week, the Kelvin Banks visit. I was like, oh, that might be like the first top defense or offensive guy they brought in on top of the 30 visit. Yeah. So we'll see what direction they go with in the first round.
Kelvin Banks would definitely be an interesting one because I think he's a guy that they think, other than Armand Membu, is probably the only one that maybe plays right tackle in the first round, and also someone that could potentially play on the interior. Because I think we talked about earlier on, I believe when we were doing one of our mock drafts, that interior offensive line is another issue that they need solving. So that'll be interesting. But for this case, I went Jihad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama, with pick 16. For me, I think it just makes the most sense. I could see Michael Williams and I could see James Pierce. I think those are probably the two other options because I think they're the most pro-ready of the names mentioned. That would be a good value here at 16 at edge rusher. But I think Jihad Campbell just gives them the most flexibility with what they can do. He's a leader. He's a guy that can play off ball. He's got play off the edge, as I mentioned. So I think he just gives them the best player available for them. Obviously, the medicals are a big issue here, right? And by the time we do our mock drafts next week, this could be completely different. And Jihad Campbell isn't in this position because what we're hearing is he's a second round guy, right?
Yeah.
Or by that meaning, he's going to the Eagles. But um, that's just how this works. But Jihad Campbell, I think, is the best option there. In round 2, pick 47, I go with Jaden Higgins, wide receiver out of Iowa State. I think one of the things you were just mentioning is the wide receiver room is a mess. I
Yeah.
mean, Zay Jones isn't necessarily who you want there. He's definitely serviceable as a wide receiver 3. But after those 3 guys, having Greg Dortch as your number 4, I'm not really too high on, especially when you're not really sure what you're going to get out of your quarterback this year.
Yeah.
So go out, get a downfield threat. He kind of completes that receiving room, right? And he's a guy that's getting some first round talk, but with guys like Luther Burden and Mika Ibuka getting second round talk, I think it's more and more likely that he's going to be dropping down and maybe not even be in the 30s in the second round. He's a guy that could potentially slip into the 40s. I had some different options here. I was thinking Jalen Noel in round 3 potentially, but I went Jaden Higgins. I think that would give Kyler Murray a really nice, big physical target. And obviously, he's one of the most consistent producers from this class. And then
Yeah.
finally, in round 3, pick 78, I go with one of my favorite players in this class, and that's Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee, the interior defensive lineman. We just talked about how they need some help on that defensive front. There's a lot of veteran presence there, but I think they could use someone that is a little bit more athletic, a little bit younger, and some depth piece. He's in my top 10 interior defensive lineman. He was in my top 5 when we did our original rankings. He's dropped a little bit just because I've watched some other players. But I think he's a guy that could really learn from a guy like Dalvin Tomlinson and challenge a guy like Darius Robinson for that second spot on the defense. Great run stopper, great pass rusher, and he's a guy that could potentially be a plug and play kind of guy next season.
Yeah. So Jihad Campbell is interesting. And like you said, like I wonder if he's going to end up being a second round guy. Because the more I hear about him, the closer to the draft, the more people are concerned about the shoulder and how his shoulder is going to hold up. People are saying it's like beef jerky or like shredded beef on his shoulder. I don't know if it's that quite serious, but every year there's the one guy in the whole process is a first round guy. And then you hear about the injuries really get into the public eye after the draft, after
He
you
goes
see
to
them
the
fall.
Eagles.
So I wonder if Jihad Campbell is going to be that guy or not. But definitely, I like the fit if he's there, and the injury gets shake out, and they don't have a problem with it. Upgrading that linebacker room. Higgins is a great addition to that offense. I love him in the second round. I think a lot of teams are going to be clamoring over that guy in the second round. So I'm interested to see who he actually lands with because we've mentioned him multiple times to multiple different teams going over this process. And then Norman Lott, yeah, I don't know if he's quite the nose tackle option, but definitely a rotational piece of that defense, kind of what they had, like you said, in Darius Robinson, they took in the first round last year. That similar role on the interior, Calais Campbell's getting old. Maybe you have him sit behind Calais Campbell. I think he just honestly spends 1 year in Arizona to retire back where he started his career. So
Yeah.
then you have Omar Norman Lott and then Darius Alexander or Darius Robinson to be the future of that interior defensive front. So 3 solid acquisitions there for the Cardinals, but I'm wondering if edge rusher is still the move though, and we'll see based on all the edge rushers they've looked into.
I think that's going to be a really interesting one. I think it's going to depend on who's available there at 16. I think they're another team that could potentially trade back, right? If there's a QB needy team that wants to kind of get into the teens, get in front of the Seahawks, get in front, even though it's all smoke, get in front of the Seahawks, get in front of the Steelers, get in front of the Rams, who all could potentially draft quarterbacks. That could be an interesting spot because I mean I think we kind of mentioned Michael Williams, Mike Green, James Pierce as probably the 3 edge rushers that they're going to be looking at
Yeah.
16. So that could be interesting. And then I think the only other way that they get an edge rusher based on the names that you just mentioned from the top 30 visits is if they go with a guy like Matthew Golden at 16 and then get a Femi or Nick Squirton at 47. So
Yeah.
that could be another interesting way, but we'll see what happens. They're a team that needs a lot, so trading back could be an interesting way to accumulate some more picks for them.
Yep, I agree.
All right. So that is the end of the NFC West. And as always, Cole, how do you think this division is going to end up next year?
I think the Rams are on top. Like I said, I think they're probably going to be a top three seed in the NFC. I think it's going to be them, the Lions, and Eagles probably in some shape or form as the top three. I think the Niners bounce back in a big way. Seattle's the real wild card, which they always kind of are, in even being like as an actual wild card in the NFC. So I wonder if, it's going to be tight at the wild card between the race in the NFC North with all four of those teams and then the race in the NFC West of how those three wild card spots shake up. But I think the Rams come out on top and be one of the top teams in the division, and the other three are going to try to claw their way into a wild card spot.
Yeah. I think for me, when I'm looking at this division, I think the Rams are making the playoffs. Whether it's division winner or wild card, I don't really care. They're good
Yeah.
enough and they're experienced enough that they will fight and make the playoffs. I think the other three teams in this division, and yes, I'm including the Cardinals in this, are good enough and have enough young talent that if they can find those few missing pieces, and in the Seahawks case, if Sam Darnold can play like he did last year, then I think all three of them could be very, very capable of making it to the playoffs next year. So we'll see what happens. I mean, the Seahawks could win the division. The 49ers, they could win the division. And the Cardinals, they can be a wild card team. I mean, they've got enough firepower and explosiveness to make the playoffs. So for me, I'm going to agree with you. Say the Rams win the division, but I just think they make the playoffs in general. But I do think one of those other playoff teams is going to be from this division. I think one team at least is going to be good enough to get in. So that is the NFC West done. That is all the division overviews done. And next week is draft week. So we've got some fun stuff. We're going to be doing mock draft. Haven't decided exactly what we're going to do yet. We'll talk about that, but either another combined mock draft or each of us do our own mock draft. We'll see what happens with that. And then there will be one more episode next week, which again, haven't decided what we're going to do yet. But most likely a My Guys segment or, going through, some positional groups or biggest changers on our boards or something like that. So should be a good week and be ready for next Thursday because it's draft day. So we will see you next week.